Hey, hello. Welcome to the video. This month's track breakdown. First, I just want to apologise. This was meant to go up last week, but as many of you you'll have been in it, the heat wave has been particularly bad this year. My studio's been 37 degrees this last week, so I just haven't been able to get anything done, which is very typical as I had a lot of plans for last week and this week, but it's cooled down now, and I've been able to get back in the studio and catch up with some work. So yeah, you'll have seen I did a poll about what track to do from my Sunder EP, and obviously the title track Sunder won. But I was thinking, because there's a lot of votes for the other tracks, so I thought I'll actually just break down each individual track over the next few months, and then you'll have some more content to watch. And I think that'd be interesting because there's quite a few varying different ways that I've made each track, and I made them all over a course of a long period, so I'll go through each track from its beginning, from its conception, if you will, to the latest version. So yeah, this is Sunder, the first version of it anyway. Yeah, let's get into it. So the general idea that I had behind this track was to have something that was sort of dropped into the second bar rather than the first bar, and it was initially not meant to be a super dance floor track, and it will be heavy and, you know, work for the dance floor, but have something that sort of dropped a bar later than you expect it to. So I started out with this main riff, which I thought of in the shower. I was singing to myself, as you do in the shower. And I come up with this melody. And this is Repro 5, actually. And it's a preset. Believe it or not, I'm not ashamed to say it, because I make most of my own sounds, but sometimes there's a preset and it's really cool. But I've tweaked it a little bit. I think just some basic adjustments, like down here in Repro you've got all these like pedals, like little stomp boxes and stuff like that. Distortion, so I've just played around with these, and then I've run it through some more effects later on. And as you can see here, this final note, this is basically where the impact is the falling riff into this final note, and that obviously, as you can see, drops halfway into the second bar. So that was the main focus of the track. I'm eating an orange as well, so sorry if it's a bit loud. So I played that note in, and then I sort of had that repeating, and then figured out a groove later on, but the main focus was on this and making this sound cool. So the first instance of effects we've got is a lot of hiss, and my first thing I did was put on some saturation. I usually like to, as you can see here with the sound, it's a bit flat. It's quite like level across the spectrum, and I just wanted to add a bit more like excitement, a bit more saturation to it. Decapitate is really good for that because it's quite subtle. Well, you can, create some really crazy distortions with it, but the way it distorts and adds harmonics is a lot more akin to analog gear rather than digital distortion units and stuff like that. So I really like Decapitate, usually the first sort of instance, and it works really well with Repro because it's an old Prophet 6 emulation, and it's just a natural pairing. So I added that, bit of drive, bit of harmonics. And the next thing I added was a filter, and this is what's being automated in the first section here. Literally just a notch filter. So I'll use EQs a lot for filtering nowadays, rather than actual filters and filter plugins and stuff. And you can create some really interesting filters and it's a bit more work because you're automating everything manually. But I think you can get a really good desired effect, especially when you have an idea in mind for what you want to make. So yeah, that's just an automated notch filter, 20 dB cut. Then we've got some reverb. And this just to give it a bit more space. It's obviously very dry sound. So I used Pro R and EQ'd out all of the wet signal from the low end, so it's just affecting the mids and upwards, not too extreme of a reverb, and I've placed it quite far back in the mix. Pretty strong decay rate and long decay rate, and also it's quite it's a very wide delay. It's just it's on 100%, but down in about 36 as well. And yeah, this plugin's really cool for reverbs in general, especially when you want to have more control over them, because I also like to use this, you'll see me use the Valhalla vintage verb, which I use quite a lot for other stuff, but it's not as controllable as something like Pro R. It's a bit more nerdy and in-depth, and it sounds really good too, so I recommend this reverb plugin. It's a good reverb, that's what I'm going for here. And then the next thing I have is a compressor. This is Goodhertz Wolf compressor, which is one of my favorite compressors. It's really cool, it's very weird, and it's a very extreme reverb. It really affects the sound, and you can see here there's like a different filters for like wow and like a lo-fi filters and stuff like that, and this really crushes up the sound and adds a bit of like the note variation. And as like I was saying before, it's repro, it's an old emulation of a vintage analog synth, and then I've got Decapitator, which is like an old analog distortion unit. I wanted to pair that with something that was a bit more warm and interesting, really. So this is the effect it's got. So this is without, and with. And you can see that's really pulling up all of the tails of the reverb. So you can do this you can do this by sidechaining the reverb signal to the signal of the volume of whatever you're running through it. That's a technique you can use. I'll probably go into that in another video, but this is a way of doing the same sort of thing, because obviously when the bulk of the note comes through, everything gets cut out, and then as soon as it lets off, all those tails are being pulled up by the compressor, and you get those interesting tails. And I've done that in most of my tracks, and it works really well for even if you've just got short reverb. So if I just put a short, like a convolution reverb on before, so if I just put like a short thing here, like you hear that tail being pulled up, even though that's only a short reverb. So you can use that really creatively. You get some nice movement out of the sound, and it really fills it up without you having to do much. It's literally just the original signal, then a reverb, then a compressor, and then that sounds nice and full, and you don't have to add tons and tons of layers on the top. So yeah, this compressor is very good. I like it. Use it. It is good. It's not too expensive as well. Okay, so the next thing I added after the compressor was some more EQ, and this is cutting out all the side information in the low end, so making all that low end mono. With this plugin, there's quite a lot of phasing going on with it, especially in the low end, which is quite cool, to be honest. It sounds really interesting and old, and that that also brings a plethora of problems when you're trying to mix this in, especially when you're not splitting it and then layering it with a clean sub bass. So if you're using the sub bass from the sound, like I wanted to keep the movement that the sub bass has. So I just cut out all the low end on the sides. So you just got mono low end up to about 150, 200. And so it lets off. Then there's a 5 dB boost up here in the high end. Usually I'd use saturation to do this sort of thing, so I just put saturation on the low end and the high end. But I just use an EQ here. And then the next step is another EQ, which is the filter that opens up over the course of this phrase. There's also a dip here in this upper mid region. This region, this like 1500 and then like 4000, like 4K. This area is really, you gotta watch this area for really sharp frequencies. Can really pierce through, and yeah, you just don't really want that. So you want to just be doing little subtractive EQs here and there, and especially when you're compressing so heavily, it's going to bring up all those frequencies. So EQing afterwards is always a good idea. And then at the end, I've just got what's basically acting as a limiter. It's just clipping off the initial hit that the transient that the bass has. And obviously with this compressor, and as I've dialed the attacking quite slow, it doesn't kick in till just after the note hits. But I wanted to retain that quality of having a real impact when it comes in, even though it's a note, it's a high-end note. So that's why I did that. And then I added a compressor in the end, just to peak clip, just to make sure it wasn't going over 0. And then that's going into I'm pretty sure this is just a sidechain bus. It's not labeled, and I know that's stressful. Like, obviously if I'd have known that I was doing this for a Patreon video, then I would have probably spent a bit more time labeling it and making it look presentable, but I work a bit messy, especially at the beginning stage. I'm just more focused on being creative and just making things rather than labeling everything, and I kind of got a picture in my head of where everything is, which isn't helpful when you're trying to show other people what you're doing, but there you go. So yeah, this is just a sidechain bus, just a transparent limiter, just making sure everything that's going into it is cut off. And then there's an EQ on as well after that, which is dipping 200, and I'm not sure why, but maybe we'll find out later on. Okay, so this is the main part of the track I'll play. So you can hear that the main idea for the track is still there. Also, I'm aware as well there's a lot of noise being brought up in the from the repro, which I think I fixed. I'll turn that off because it's a bit annoying. I fixed later on in a project, I think. But the main part of the track is there, and you get the general idea. The groove is a lot different. The drums are all different. I think the snare's different. I think I used a few layers on this snare drum, but I just wasn't happy with it. It sounded a bit too abrasive and not cool enough. I mean, it sounds cool. It's the wrong word to use, but I just wanted it to feel a bit different than how it sounded here. Like, this sounds to me more like a dance floor banger tune, and yeah, originally I wanted it to sound different, but then in the middle I made a few changes, and in the end it ended up being more of a dance floor track, just to make it more digestible for the audience. I'll go into that later, because that was from some feedback from Noisia. It was the way it drops is it changes in the next few projects, but the groove is a lot harder to follow, and then playing it out in a live setting, I'd play out the track and then people would hear the drop and still not be dancing, and I'm like, well, that was the drop, you didn't feel the drop. And then you know, if you're just confusing people, then it's not got the desired effect. I wanted it to sound different and cool and have this delayed impact, which when you heard it, it threw you off a bit, but you could still feel the groove, and people weren't feeling the groove, so I had to change that around a bit. But in this instance, it's easier to follow, but then it changes to being not so easy to follow, and then ends up being back to dance floor again. So the kick, I think, is the same. Yes, this is just linked to a Peak controller sidechain thing, to that sidechain bus. Oh, I didn't really do anything with this. I think this is an E9 kick from his sample. Yeah, it is, from his sample pack. I just faded out all of that rumbly low end. It's a bit of EQ. The transient processor, but that's muted. Snare. There's a snare here. I think I changed this. It's a bit too like neuro-y for me. And that's layered with a hi-hat, actually, which I've pitched. And it's layered with a clap and another couple of layers. It's very... I'll play this. So this is an open hat, which I've pitched down, I've faded in and out. So I played with the volume. I've then EQ'd all of that low end out. And then added a bit of a reverb as well. All this stuff might change in the later project, but I thought I'd just go into them anyway. There's a dry clap here, which is just not going into any mixer channel, which is a bit weird. I think I added this in later on because it only plays for this first couple of bars anyway. So maybe ignore that. And then there's another little layer, which is 100% reverb, just like a really short kind of convolution room kind of reverb. So I'll do that a lot. I'll have my main sort of transient, which would be this guy, and then layer all these kind of swooshy room layers. I think this snare just has some EQ. Yeah, a bit of EQ. That's about it. The hat, I don't know if I did much. I don't think there is a hat in this. Oh, it is. Is this layer? I think this is a sample. Oh! Yeah, this is a sample of an old noisier tune. Which I faded in out. I think I just used that as a layer. They won't know, it'll be fine. And then, yeah, for the bass, I've got some more stuff. So on the main section here, the main bass one, I've got this sub-hit. Which kind of sounds a bit like a Spore sort of bass line to me. Okay. Can I play it, please? There we go. So this is using Scrapyard waveform. Oh, so right, yeah. So this is a. These are wavetables from Massive, which you can port over and use in Serum. And this is Scrapyard, which. Which has some really cool qualities to it. So then it's got some unison. There's a LFO just controlling everything, like the movement of pretty much everything on here. Ignore oscillator array, that's not being active. And there's a sub. Just had a bit of bottom end. And then low pass filter. And then hyper dimension. No unison here. I used the unison in the oscillator, and then I just used a bit of the dimension on Serum to create a bit more interesting. It adds lots of fluttery layers and stuff like that on the top, so I always especially when you're compressing pretty heavily afterwards, it really brings up all of those tails like I was talking about earlier, but with dimension, with this like extra stereo space and stuff like that. So then there's a distortion, which is automating the drive, making it super abrasive. And then our good friend, the reverb filter, that's without, that's with. And I like using this subtly. I'm just using like a small portion of the cutoff of the filter because, yeah, it just adds a bit more texture, and it's not too extreme, because if you use the majority of the cutoff, it can sound really weird and bad. And if you use the wrong part and then compress straight after, it brings up all these like horrible, nasty, high-end like paper tearing noises. And yeah, so I used a bit of that, and then the multiband compressor. And yeah, that's about it for that noise. I think that stayed the same. And then we've got these big, I'll make these bigger so you can see them easier. I've got these big, long bass noise hit things. Oh. Oh, yeah, I'll go into the effects of the mixer chain as well. So these are going into this, let's talk about this guy now. This guy's effects, got some EQ. A very odd EQ. So that's sort of dipping the 300 area, 300 hertz, and then boosting slightly afterwards. This is, I don't know. Don't know about that. So one of them things when you're in creative mode, you just do stuff and you can't really explain them later. So yeah, got the decapitator again, adding a bit of harmonics. I'll mute everything afterwards actually, and then bring everything in. That's the decapitator without and with. That's adding quite a lot of distortion there. Then a transient processor. But I don't know if this was muted. I think I was trying to shape the sound a bit more with this transient processor, which you can do playing around with the release. So that's a cool little trick you can do. You can play around with transient processors to, yeah, play around with shape the sound a bit more as you want. And it can kind of sound a bit like a compressor without actually compressing anything. And then we got a reverb. Again, just a little room reverb guy. Then some compression. Really heavy compression here. And then some EQ, which is shaped very weirdly. And this is what's tightening up the sound, because there's so much phasing and low-end stereo information. You know, that completely makes the majority of this sound mono, actually. But as it's the main, you know, first impact, the bar on the first beat, it's just straight down the middle, just straight in your face. So, yeah, I mean, I could have gone a less extreme with this. But, yeah, that's about it. I'm just controlling this area a bit more down here, doing a bit of weird shaping, and yeah, not too much to talk about there. And then that's just going into that sidechain thing. So let's talk about these big bass boys. So what do they sound like? So these are going through the same mixer channel as the Repro was. Why is it not being played? Oh, no, they're not. They're going the next one. Okay, never mind. So yeah, same process again. Bit of decapitator and a bit of reverb. Bit of compression. And then some final EQ after the compressor. Some subtractive stuff, some additive stuff, making the low end mono. And then that's going into the sidechain. And then let's go into the patch. So, Reese Mess Moby. This is a patch that I made for a remix from Moby, which I just I never made anything that I was really happy with. I made a few sketches and stuff, but never got to finish it. But this is one of the patches from that, which I think I tweaked, but I don't know if I did. I think this stayed pretty much the same as it was in the original remix that I did, which you will never hear. So yeah, Reese Mess, which I like this wavetable quite a lot. It's really cool. I don't think this... Yeah, this oscillator's not even playing. It's just one oscillator. So let's have a look at this absolute mess. So I've got this really long LFO that's been linked to the filter on here, and it's also been linked to... Yeah, that's just been linked to this low pass filter that I've got. This LFO is the pitch, so this is being linked to the master pitch here. So I can play around with this. So I can play around with that, getting more like gabba kicks and stuff. But yeah, I think I left that like this. Oh no, what have I done? Put it back to where it was. I think it was about there. Yes, that will do. That will do. So this LFO here has been linked to just a little bit of the wavetable position. And I think... What's going on here? Nothing. So there's nothing being automated on the... in the effects, which is quite handy. So yeah, it's mainly just this hit and then this low pass filter. Excuse me, so I've not added any of this, so you can ignore that. That doesn't exist. So there's a bit of comb filtering. So comb filters are really cool, especially for bass stuff, and putting it before the distortion like I have done here. So I've got a filter and then a compressor, and then that's running into a distortion unit. So usually I do this the other way around, but by using the filter and compressor before the distortion, you can get some really cool, interesting stuff. Same sort of technique as using an EQ and then doing that before the distortion and subtracting or enhancing frequencies that you want more distorted or less distorted, or vice versa, or whatever. So that's an interesting way of doing it, because if you obviously put the distortion before the filter, kind of just get that, but then after, you get that, which is quite different and sounds a lot cooler to my ears. So yeah, just a multi-band compressor. It's not dialed in too aggressively here. I've brought the bands down a little bit, and then it's got asymmetrical distortion. I don't know what that stands for actually. Anyway, so there's a bit of distortion and then some flange. Which to my ears isn't actually really doing anything. Again, these are all things that I'm probably just doing quickly and then I have no explanation for. But yeah, this is running into a mix track. So this is without the mixer track. This is with. So I got Decapitator again. I think this was when I first started properly using it all the time on everything, because it's amazing. So I use that, then a bit of reverb like before with the repro bass. Just cut out all of the low end wet signal. Pretty spacious reverb. Mix 20%. Then compressing. And then finally some more EQ, cutting out all the low end, and then boosting up here. And that's going into the sidechain bus, like I was saying before. What's this guy? Ah, so this is the next one, which... So I kind of wanted to... Oh god, it's so loud. Excuse me as well. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I kind of wanted to recreate this noise in Serum and have the same major third sort of thing. So this is a variation of this patch. So this is the second oscillator that I'd muted in the first patch, but I've tuned it up for semitone, so it's playing the major third. So yeah, you get some really interesting things. I like doing that a lot. You'll see me doing that before, where I've using the second oscillator, playing a different note, and then distorting it, and then playing around with the note, and you get different resonances and different. It interacts with itself differently depending on the note because of the, you know, the rate of the oscillator and all that. Similar to just detuning slightly. You know, it adds more of a faster or slower movement. Okay, 0. This was on 4. So I think it's pretty much the same patch as before. Yeah, literally the same patch as before, but just with this extra oscillator on it this time. That plays the second time around just for a bit of variance. Which is not playing. It's the first time and then the second time. So here I've added this like these sub-hit things, which are just little resamples to back up this like dun-da bit, which I think I maybe changed later on. But I was sort of playing with the idea of these backing up and being layered with the notes, so it had a bit more impact. But I think I not ruined. I think I changed that. This is the yeah. I'll go into this drum set. At the end of the bar, there's this guy, which is a sample from Robert Glasper track, I think, which is some old samples that I did as a. Can't remember the name of the song. It's a really cool song. The drums sound incredible. But I sampled that and just took that edge part and then laid it in. I think I stretched it a little bit as well. Yeah, just stretched it out like this. That's just there. And then what's this? It's just some like layer thing. But a lot of this is just like shit that I've just dragged in. This is a thing from New Tone sample pack. It's just a reversed, just a texture that I've reversed and then pitched down, and then that's about it for this. So the reverb in the bass line is being automated. Let me see. The reverb is just being automated in and out. So it comes out just before this main impact, just to give that first hit more of an impact. Then I've got some hats here. This Superior drummer, just a hi-hat, little hi-hat layer, bit of distortion, decapitator, bit of EQ, just taking out all the lows. And I've got this gross beat. So this is a sidechain thing that I've used before, I think. Or I've shown you guys. Yeah, it's just like a volume automator looper thing. So yeah, you draw in the pattern that you want it to loop at, and then you can change the the position of it and all that kind of stuff. So I've got this in sort of it's just constantly looping this, which creates an interesting texture, interesting groove behind everything else. And then some more EQ after that. That's pretty much it for that version of the project, so let's go into the next one, shall we? V2. There's 4 versions of this. I'm not sure how different they all are. I haven't been through any of these yet, so there's some things I'm discovering in here. There's a lot of like samples as well, which I've removed because I just use them creatively, and then later on I'll like change things out and use more of my own sounds rather than just sampling everything. So what's this guy? So this is the main pitch, and then I've got a whole intro now. Right, so this was before I added the main big intro synth, and I just kind of had a few more little bits going on with the track. I had this there for the structure because I knew I wanted this section, this section. You know, I wanted that main, like, big build into that, and then into the next part. And yeah, I just didn't know what I wanted here. Whether I wanted some big like orchestral thing or just some cool effect stuff or just a pad which loops or whatever. But I've just layered this out so I knew I wanted something here anyway. And yeah, I don't think much else has changed. Yeah, so before I was talking about the groove changing, this is the groove that I had settled on, which I thought was really cool. So we'll listen through to that actually for a couple of hours. So that's obviously quite different in terms of the groove, I think. It's a bit harder to follow. For me, that's like easy to follow, but when you're playing that on a dance floor, it doesn't translate as much, especially when you already know the track. So I don't know what to go into first, I guess. Intro? I'm going to mute this hiss. I still haven't fixed that, obviously. Might have even just left that in at the end, just because it sounds more organic and alive than just complete silence. So I've got this. Is this just an atmosphere sample thing? Ah, it's like an old vintage one. And then stretch that out. It's not really going through anything on a mixer. Got some good old Vengeance one-shots here. Some reverb. That's in the intro, that reverse thing, which we talked about before. And this, guys, this is a resample, I think. I'm gonna make that unique and see what that sounds like. That's what that sounds like on its own, and then I've just stretched it out. So it's just some resample, no mixing or anything, which is a bit weird because there's quite a lot of mud in there. Oh, that sounds okay. And what's this guy? So that's a vocal sample from good old Vengeance again, which I've just cut, EQ'd, and I'm looping it in this fashion. Yeah, just cool little layers in the background, just adding all those layers in and just creating a bit more texture and stuff like that. This is all obviously empty because I haven't added all the instrumentation bits and stuff like that. So let's go into this bit, shall we? So I've got this sample now, which I don't know where that's from. Oh, Jungle sample pack. So it's just a vintage sample pack guy. A bit of reverb, bit of compression, and I think I've used the ring mod. I like using ring mod and stuff on vocals and using that for effects. Always good to use loads of different filters like ring mods and stuff like that, and automating them with your main vocal samples and stuff, because it just creates a bit more interest than just having the sample just playing on its own. So I've got this guy as well, which I think I sampled from what they called, it's like a quartet. It's like a string quartet, but it's like a Jewish string quartet. I can't remember the name. I can think of the name. It's right in my head. I can't think of it. Anyway, they're playing a song and then they all stop and make this noise. And I sampled it from the video, which is really low quality. This was years ago, but then yeah, I still use it every now and again. Let's get some echo boy, just some Yeah, just some delay and stuff, and then some reverb. This is a background layer. So as for the drums, I pitched them up, and I was playing with this idea of pitching them. And then to sort of play off the notes that are playing. So that's playing the, I think it's the 5th or the 3rd, I don't know. I don't know. I think this is a Dota 2 sample. Yeah, from Spectre. That's the noise when Spectre teleports to one of her illusions, just so you know. I'm a big nerd. I like Dota. I think that's what this one is as well. Yeah, it's a combination of those 2 samples from the game. Don't tell Valve. Lots of samples in here. So the hat I've added, which is this X-Fur hat. It's got some cool analog hats from synthesizers, and then that's just got a very EQ, low cut, nothing too crazy. So obviously as the tune progresses, I'm bringing in more these top layers just to create a bit more movement, a bit more tension, building up, building up. So that's a good tip, is to never just have all your drums playing from the get-go, unless you're making like a roller, and I mean like old school roller, not like new rollers. I mean like old Calyx and TB or break or whatever. It's just the same break for the whole tune, and then that's fine, that works in that situation. But with these sort of tracks, it's good to have progression, it's good to have more layers coming in later on, and then switching out layers, and you know, even changing hats that people probably won't even notice, and switching them out for different ones and whatever, just so they fit. It's just good to pay attention to those kind of things in the background. Sometimes you don't need to do that, but especially when you're with the hats here, I mean, they're just playing, you know, 4 on the floor. So it's good to have that extra little, you know, like a quieter hat like this guy in the background. Just to, yeah, create a bit more tension and movement. So I've added this open hat, which is a Vengeance one. I like Vengeance. I think they do good samples. Cancel me, I don't care. Vengeance is, they've got some great sounds. Okay, and then another reverb open hat thing, which has just been layered with the break down here. I'm going to mute this bass. So I've got this guy, which is just a repro, just a bell sound with a bit of echo boy on it. And then, oh, there's some more effects. Just lots of effects stuff in the background, just filling it up. And then I've got this guy, which I wanted something to change here in the next part. I wanted a bit of a switch up so that there's something that comes in the end of that phrase just to keep you on your toes a bit. So I've got this resample. Which is, again, Vengeance. Which is like that. Sorry, I'm messing around a bit too much here. Okay, so that's got some blood overdrive, bit of saturation, decapitator, and then just a bit of reverb, which isn't actually on, that's muted, so ignore that. And then some EQ, and then just dipping out this 300 area. Always talk about this, but there's a lot of people. I'm getting a lot of demos with my tier 3 patrons, and usually the basses are all quite flat, and that's great because obviously it's nice and full, but then there's also a lot of muddy frequencies in this sort of area, this like 300 hertz area, so it's always good to keep that under balance. I usually use EQ to shape the sound, but you can do like a multi-band compression, so you can add a compressor in like this sort of area. And then, you know, you can play around with your threshold and your range and stuff. So multiband compression is a good way to do that if you don't want to go the EQ route. And then it's also dynamic. So if you're using like Pro MB, it's dynamic, it reacts to the sound. But now with Pro EQ 3, I'm going to go into video on this actually. as well, you can use dynamic EQ points like this. So instead of having this like EQ that's just sort of set in stone, you can use a dynamic EQ like this guy, which creates that movement, and it doesn't color the sound as much as compression. So yeah, or you can use them in tandem as well, so you can compress and then EQ afterwards, so you can get the best of both worlds. So yeah, I'm gonna go into a video on that anyway, because I use it quite a lot, and a lot of people are asking me about that, so I'm gonna do that. And then yeah, what else have we got? Some bits, just like hi-hats, drums, little effects in the background. Really the main thing was the textures and the structure here. So then I wanted everything to dip out and then it to be a bit more like a sub note underneath, switch, as you can see here. And then we've got this old, old jungle samples. That's the vocal. And then yeah, I wanted to have this switch, so sounds like this. So the idea was then this was going to go into a two-step drum pattern that'd be easier to follow, because obviously in the beginning it's like into this. Very head noddy, head bangy, 4 on the floor thing. So what's this? This is just a sub with an LFO in it, bit of saturation, just warmed it up and then turned it down a bit more. Mute that hiss again. Really should have fixed that. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, I think I cleaned this up as well because it's a bit sort of messy. I'm getting a bit of... Let me change my ASIO a bit. I don't know if this will fuck it up actually. I'm not going to fuck with that just in case it fucks the recording up. So then, what did I do? So I think I cut all of the sub out of the original sample and layered it, the original repro sound actually, and then layered it with this sub. That might just be later on though. Yeah, that's just later on. So I brought in this extra sub layer later on just to back up the first part, and then it's all two-step drums from now on. And then I also added this layer, this guy, which is Vengeance. Bit of a synth thing, just to back up the snare, so it's got more of a note on the snare, but I think I dialed this back later on because it's a bit too boxy almost. There you go. That's that part. So you can see it's come together quite a lot. Like the majority of the track's there, but obviously I don't have the intro. So let's go to the dry. Put that in there. See what this goes like. Yeah, I don't know whether to stop the broadcast now and then change my sample rate, because the sample rates, it might fuck it up. I'm not sure. It shouldn't do. I'm going to try it. I'm going to risk it and hopefully it just works, but... Oh god. This one's taking a little longer to open up, so I think I've added a bit more. Oh, there's camel space. Got some camel space. Got some spring reverb. Oh god, what else have we got? Oh god, we've got a lot here. Cool. Like I said, this is all stuff that I'm sort of rediscovering at the same time as you, so just give myself like... Oh, that should be fine. I think I'm still... Okay. Yeah, I'm getting levels and stuff, so it should be fine. So now I've got this intro, so I've got this guy. I could sit and play with this thing for days. It's so nice. So this is Repro again. I'm just using it. Oh yeah, good tip if you're using Repro 5, you want to download it, play with it, and you're using more than one, make sure you check this multi-core mode. Usually when you open it up, it doesn't have that on, and then after adding 2, then your CPU just goes to shit. So make sure you're using multi-core mode if you have a multi-core PC processor. So that's a good tip. But yeah, I use this a lot for pads and stuff. So what I'll do is I'll compress pretty heavily with a reverb beforehand. So the signal chain for this is a bit of Echo Boy, which I automate in. It's also been filtered. So if I play around with the wet level of this plugin, like that, you get these interesting. Just so you don't have a static note, you're giving it more like interesting things. So I'll use Echo Boy for stuff like that, for pads and atmospheres, and it's a good way to resample as well. Just have your note playing and then play around with Echo Boy, like mixing in the wet level of the effect, so you get some cool stuff. Okay, so, but I'll usually do that down here with the FL rather than using the actual mix level of the plugin. So just personal choice, no reason behind that. And then what else we got? A bit of EQ, dipping that 300 area again, bit of a high end vintage verb. Then skipped to plug in that. So then I got the good Hertz compressor again. Wolf compressor, very cool. Pairs great with Repro, as I've previously said. So I've got the wow on max here, so this is going to make the note go in and out of pitch basically. So without, you hear how it alters the note, and then with, very Blade Runner. So yeah, I use that quite a bit. So that's the compressor. Then I've got some saturation here. Saturn, it's just on warm tape mode. It's just boosting up that high band here, the presence and the treble. And there's a boost here in the mids as well, like sort of this area. And then finally some EQ, which is muted, but I think that's just a filter that comes in later on. Yes, I've added that. So I've added there's lots of automation here for the mix level of the plugin, and then there's the filter. So now I've got this main chord section, which I've written in, and I've also played, I think I recorded this in manually, and I've just quantized it, but always a good idea to play around with the velocities of your notes, so they're not as static, especially with big pads and stuff like that. It's always good to humanize it a little bit, because obviously when a human's playing a note, it's not going to be 100, every single note is at 100 velocity all the time, so you're going to create more dynamics in your song structures and in your melodies and stuff like that. So always good, humanize it, especially with pianos and more like pluck sort of sounds. It's really noticeable. If everything's at 100, then there's no dynamics, and there's no there's no dynamics. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, and then what else we got here? We got a little atmosphere sound, some birds chirping. Got tons of these like atmospheric noises. You can get stuff like this from Freesound. So if you go on freesound.com and then just search like chirping birds atmosphere, then it will bring you loads of stuff up, and it's royalty free, so that's always good. So that's just in the background. It's creating a bit of, you wouldn't have known that was there, but it just creates a bit of texture, a bit of interesting atmosphere, and fills it out a little bit more. I don't think I've got any processing on it. I think I've stretched it out a bit. Yeah, I've just stretched it out so you wouldn't necessarily know it's birds chirping. But this is, I'll have it as its original speed. That's a sample, but then I've stretched it out, so you know, it almost sounds like a synth because it's lower down. But yeah, there's that. So here I've added a kick. This is one of the spring reverb kicks that I've gone into. So if you look into the drum processing tutorial that I did before, I did the same method with this, using a spring reverb, then resampling back in. So that's the intro kick, and then there's this extra loud, boomy thing that comes in as well. So I'll mute the chord so you can hear that a bit better. I don't think there's even any sidechain going on here. It's just being played over the top of everything, kind of like cutting it out. So I've added a master chain now. So this is my glue compressor, which I've used before. And this is before I was using the high pass filter as well, so everything's pretty heavily compressed here. And then that's just running into a transparent limiter, just bringing up the volume. Nothing too fancy. Then some more impacts and stuff, just to fill out all of these, this chord section. This one shot, which I think is in the Blackout. Yeah, that's Blackout sample pack that I made. Which I think is in, I put in the Patreon sample pack, the first one, so that's in there. Go use it if you want. That's what it's there for. Then some hats, reverb on it, then yeah, there's that pluck thing. So yeah, like the main focus of the intro is just to have a bit more of a progression and something. I think it's pretty inspired by, subconsciously, by Program, Noisier Interface. In the intro is quite, now that I'm listening to it, it's almost a bit similar to the big orchestral synthy intro that Program has. It's obviously not as hype sounding, but you know, similar sort of inspiration. So going with 48 bar structure for your intro is, I'd only really recommend that if you have a key element that you want to focus on. If you want to have an element of a track that's like, this is the bit, this is the section, this is the hook, basically, and you're telling the audience, like, this is the part that everything revolves around, it's this part. So giving it that 16 bars, so here you've got 16 bars of it just playing out. You're giving the audience time to digest it and be like, oh, you know, that's the part, okay, and then it builds into the next bit, and this part works quite well, I think, because it just, you don't really know what's coming after that. I mean, it could go into anything, and I think that's why the tune works, is because, you know, there's mass amounts of tension here, and then for it to not drop on the first beat is also a bit, you know, it literally doesn't even drop till nearly the second bar. So yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, and it was a massive struggle to get this to work, and I sent this version to Noisier and I had tons of feedback on it, and this consensus was like, they really liked it, we all really liked it how it was, and then it worked, but to get the most out of it, to get the maximum amount of impact when this was released, was to change the drums and make them easier to digest, basically. So I think here the drums are still the same as they were before, but there you go. I've changed the snare out for something a bit more digestible. That main transient thing. The interesting thing here is there's only one sidechain, and that's to the kick. I wanted the kick to be like the driving force of the track. It's just this huge stompy kick. So literally everything is just being sidechained to the kick. Well, nearly everything. And there's no sidechaining on the snare either, so the snare is kind of part of the the rest of the track instead of being, you know, more of the focus of the track. You spend so much time on the snare and making that part of the focus of the track, but I think here it's just like it's a pretty basic snare, I think, and having no sidechain on it, it puts less emphasis on that and more on the kick, which is why I did that. What else have we got? I don't think we really got much else added to this one. I think I just added the intro here. So these switch up parts, these are just different notes being played. And then there's a ride that comes in every now and again. So here I've added those intro chords, which are just filtered into this section here. So I've made this this background layer that I had before, backing up the snare. I've made that obviously a lot quieter in the mix. It's less like just ringy, like a baseball bat hitting a keg or something. Yeah, it's got some reverb and then some camel space. This is where the camel space comes in. I'm so surprised this still works, but it does, and I hope I never lose it. But yeah, it's got some lovely delays and filtering and stuff like that on it. So I've used that. Yeah, ride. What else is there going up? Pretty much copy paste this bit. And here I changed the notes again on the bass, and then I added like an echo boy, I think, to this. But where is it? Where are you? Oh yeah, so as you can hear as well, I finally fixed that hiss, so I just used a little gate at the beginning. Cut out all that hiss that's in there. Very sorry about that. Nothing's changed much EQ-wise on the main. So this is just a crystallizer that's adding all of that cool textureness to it, and that's just being automated in for this section, and it comes in when the second drop happens. It's being automated in so that it comes in at the end of each bar, like you can see here. Oh, I don't know what just happened there, but something. I've accidentally copied something over. So I'm using the tail end of all of that crystallizer messiness to kind of act as like a riser, which is what this is, and yeah, it changes dynamically with the different notes being played. So, you know, you play a load of notes, then that tail will be completely different to the next load of notes that you play, which I think is cool. And excuse me, what else have we got? I think we had another serum here. Yeah, so I've changed the wavetable and I've added a stand semitone. Let's create that. I think I took this out in the final version. I think I've just got like a distorted, hissy, like crunchy mess instead of that. I thought that was cool, but I thought it was also a bit predictable because, you know, the current trend is to have like a big foghorn thing, like a bow, and then the next switch up it's like a bit more higher up, and then the second drum is like, you know, it's like it's easy to expect that's what's coming. So I think that's why I just took that out, because I know it sounds fine, and you know it works, but it's not. And the whole point of the track is to do something that people aren't like. You have to listen to it a few times, I think, to really get the structure of it. Maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but No, I thought it was just a cool idea. So I just didn't want to go for something that was just expected here. Just you're expecting something to change almost, and that wasn't it. So I just made a distorted serum instead. What's this guy? That's just another version of the thing. So yeah, I just made this longer. Copy paste, copy paste. For the second section, I only had 64 bars instead of. So I only had 32 bars instead of a whole 64, just to make it a bit shorter. I mean, it's like 4 minute 20 something, 4 minute 24. Yeah, that's about it. You know, people aren't really listening all the way over to the edges of the tracks anymore, and as long as you've got like a something here, then it doesn't really matter too much. And as the track 48 bar intro, it's already pretty long, so I didn't want it to be like a 5-6 minute track. You know, unfortunately. Yeah, and then there's just the outro with just that melody from the beginning. So not much else to talk about with that one. So let's go in the final, and I think these are just like minute changes that I made, and then I just did the final leveling mix on it. This didn't get sent off for mastering, so this is all the final mix. So how are we doing? 1 hour 6 minutes. Oh my goodness, I've been talking for so long. But yes, let me take this opportunity. Thank you, anyone who's watching, for supporting the Patreon. It really does mean a lot, and I'm hoping that people are getting a lot from this, because I know there's other producers out there doing Patreons and stuff, and I just hope this content, I hope it's worth the money you're paying, because we're all struggling, everyone's affected by the current circumstances, and the fact that people are wanting to pay and support me through all of this as well is very humbling, and I appreciate it very much, so thank you very much. Let's get into this one. So any changes? So I added another clap here, which is an old 80s. Oops. Whoop. Whoop. Oh my god. So it's got some Valhalla plate reverb. It's an 80s sample, so I wanted it to have like a plate, you know. This is dry. And then with the reverb. And then a bit of crystallizer. So this crystallizer you can use on drums as well, not just melodic stuff. You know, create this cool, almost like it's falling down a missile silo or something. Quite interesting. Yeah, bit of EQ, bit of high end. Removed, sorry. Bit of high end removed. That's the key thing to say there. Any other changes? No, not really. That's all pretty much the same. I think it just sort of mix things at this stage. So I think I just played around with the EQs a bit more. But everything's pretty much the same as it was in the beginning, because getting your mix to a solid level early on is a good way to keep things flowing, and you know, great way to have a look at this actually. Oh, info. 4 hours. So I mean, this took like 5 hours of time altogether, which isn't like a massive amount of time really. It's such a big track. But I think the key is getting your mix to a stage in the beginning, getting all your levels pretty much where you want them to be. That really helps with writing the rest of the track. And also, there's a lot of time in between these different instances of the project. I made the main idea, and I knew I just wasn't ready yet to finish that idea off, and I knew I wasn't. I started to think a bit more about the execution of it and what I wanted for the intro. Like, I was happy with the main riff, this bass thing, but I didn't know about the things afterwards, and then I spent more time thinking about this project than I did actually in the project making things. So it's not always a good idea just to get it finished as fast as possible. Sometimes it's better to let it sit, and a lot of the projects in the Vision EP were like that. I just yeah, I just let them sit for long periods of time in between the different instances, and then till I was ready, I was like, oh, I know what to do, and then I just went in and did it because I'm so cool. No, it's just just thinking about it, that helps a lot. But also the key point that I was trying to make before I went off on a huge tangent was just, get all your levels right, get the mix at a point where you're happy with it. This top-down mixing approach that I have really helps with that, because it's just, I just set my levels into my master chain, and then I don't have to worry too much about the mix. It's sort of just it's kind of I've done it all pretty early on, so then the rest of it's just about adding it, and then adding other elements, and then sitting them in the mix with EQ and stuff like that. So that's where the top-down mixing approach really works, and I think it actually works better than not having anything on your master for workflow, because you're just able to get things out a lot quicker. So try it out. I mean, it might work for you or it might not, but it's whatever works for you. Everyone's different, and that's just the way that it works for me, and I'm happier producing when I can just be more creative and just wrap it up. Okay, speaking of wrapping it up, I should stop talking so much and get on with it. Just lots of risers, vengeance effects, impacts, just like variations of different risers and stuff. Good old vengeance. But I've stretched these out, so I've obviously not got them like playing just their usual, whatever they sound like. I've stretched them out to give them a bit of a different texture, so they're not as recognisable. Okay. So that's something you changed as well. I actually didn't go into this switch bass. Whoa, that was cool. I just notched out all of that. Oh god, it's doing it again. Stop it. It's the crystallizer from... Oh, okay, anyway. I notched all of that out completely, so it sits a bit better in the... It just sits as more of like an underlying element rather than a focal element. So I wanted something here, but there's nothing... I didn't want anything crazy. As again, what I was saying before about having the main focus just be on the riff and the big impact thing. If you had more stuff, it kind of like clutters it up a little bit more, so... I think that's about it, really. That's pretty much the project. I think this is just a final, level mix at the end, and then I think I added the chords back in the outro. Basically it. So yeah, master chain is just this glue compressor, and then just a limiter, transparent limiter. I was going to push this a bit louder and get it to like -3.5 or something. I think ham-fisted is at like -3.5, which is a bit silly. I've vowed not to do it again, and loudness isn't as important as it used to be. So this one sat around -4.5, -5. I think you get your tracks to loudness around like -5.5 or something. That's usually fine. Even quieter than that. I know that like Alex Perez's stuff, his tunes are like -7 or something. It's not all about the loudness, but this is a really upfront track, so I made this pretty loud. Then Ham-Fisted is even louder, so we'll go into that on next month's one, I guess. So yeah, I hope you found that interesting. It was very interesting for me to go over everything again, because there's a lot of stuff in here that's a bit... I'm discovering it for the first time as much as you, so yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, next month, I'll go over Ham-Fisted, the next track, and that was the one that got the most amount of votes, I think. If it's not, I'll do the others. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned some things. And now that it's cool, there'll be some more videos over the next couple of weeks. I meant to do one last week, like I said, but it's been too hot. It's already too hot. I've got the windows shut. And it's too hot. So I'm going to go and leave you to it. Have a great day. And speak to you in a bit. All right. Bye-bye.